Tonight on Ukraine Today, a secret Russian-US plan. Is it true that Moscow and Washington, without Ukraine or its allies, have already agreed on how to end the war? German support. Berlin has announced long-range missiles for Ukraine. Could this finally be the Taurus? Days of mourning in Ternopil. At least 26 people were killed in a Russian strike, 3 of them children. The Turkish Platform. President Erdoğan has proposed conditions for a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. Ukraine agreed. So why is the Russian dictator silent? All that and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit the like button and let's jump into the news. We start with a story that's, well, a bit tense. The US and Russia have allegedly drafted a secret plan to end the war without Ukraine or its allies at the table. Axios and Reuters reported at first, and other outlets quickly joined in. According to those publications, the document has 28 points. It was supposedly prepared by Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, together with Russia's Kirill Dmitriev. Some details were revealed by Financial Times journalist Christopher Miller. He says the so-called US-Russia peace plan includes the withdrawal of Ukraine's defense forces from Donetsk and Luhansk, cutting the Ukrainian army in half, banning certain types of weapons, I'd guess they mean long-range drones and missiles, blocking Ukraine from joining NATO and prohibiting any foreign troops in Ukraine for at least several years. Is there confirmation that this plan actually exists? Nope. Would I be surprised if it turns out to be real? Also no. President Zelensky said Ukraine supports every strong and fair proposal from President Trump to end the war. Kyiv is ready to work in meaningful formats. According to Zelensky, only President Trump and the United States have enough power to bring this war to an end. Ukraine's intelligence chief, Kirill Budanov, also talked about Trump's critical role in any ceasefire process. In an interview with Channel 24, he said,
"His actions are very systematic and consistent. And who he is for us, maybe let me just rephrase not even your question, but the whole idea here, without his involvement, I don't think there is any chance to stop the fighting, as of now."
Budanov added that the window to end the war will reopen in early to mid-February 2026. The EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Kaja Kallas, also commented on this US-Russia reports.
What we as Europeans have always supported is a long-lasting and just peace, and we welcome any efforts to achieve that. Of course, for any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board. So this is very clear.
And what about Trump? Trump says he's disappointed in Putin. He said this while speaking at an investment forum in Saudi Arabia.
It's 8 wars. I've settled 8 wars. I have 1 to go. You know what that one is. I thought that was going to be my easy one because I have a good relationship with President Putin, but I'm a little disappointed in President Putin right now. He knows that. I thought that was going to be the easy one.
It would be nice if he came up with something a bit more original. He's repeating the same lines with tiny changes. On the other hand, he can say whatever he wants. What matters is that he acts decisively and sticks to basic common sense. Meanwhile, General Kit Kellogg is reportedly leaving his position as US Special Envoy for Ukraine. Reuters journalist Graham Slattery says this could happen in January. According to him, Kellogg's decision is tied to overload and to his belief that several White House officials are not acting decisively enough toward Russia. We are waiting to hear Kellogg's own reaction. Ternopil has declared days of mourning for the victims of the Russian strike. 22 people are still missing. Rescuers have been searching under the rubble for more than a day. As of now, 26 people are confirmed dead, including 3 children. Ukraine's armed forces have shown how a mobile air defense team shot down a Caliber missile in the Khmelnytsky region. This happened during the latest massive Russian attack. Ukrainian drones have struck a Ryazan oil refinery for the 8th time this year. It's one of Russia's largest refineries and a supplier for the occupying army. In other words, a completely legitimate target. The terrorist state Russia may soon face cold and darkness. Every strike on Ukraine's energy system triggers a mirrored response. And while earlier Ukraine relied mostly on drones, now long-range missiles are also being used. Plus, partner-supplied weapons like ATACMS are working beautifully. More on that ahead.
Ukrainian long-range drones are cutting off electricity in the occupied Donbass.
In short, charge your phones. Looks like they've decided to shut off the power everywhere for us. I've already counted more than 30 of them.
And Ukrainian cruise missiles are halting the sale of Russian oil at the port of Novorossiysk. The Ukrainian defense industry is developing rapidly. Kyiv is increasing its capability to strike deep into Russian territory.
No fucking way. Seriously, no way.
Look, just listen.
Where are we go? What a wild ride this is.
This is Belgorod. So basically, right now there is no power at all anywhere in Belgorod.
The only argument in any negotiations or agreements with the aggressor is a powerful Ukrainian army and large-scale domestic production of long-range strike weapons.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, yes, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their air force. That's why it became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at the enterprises of Russia's military-industrial complex and energy system.
For strikes against the occupier's military targets in the occupied territories, as well as in Russia's border regions, long-range and rocket drones such as Bars, Palyanitsia, Peklo, FP-1, FP-2, and Lyuty are mainly used. The scale of strike drone production in Ukraine is such that Russia, including Moscow, is visited by hundreds of drones almost daily.
Cities like Moscow and Leningrad, which are the most protected by the enemy's air defense systems, may start to be hit as early as the evening. Bars can reach them, and I firmly believe this should happen in a systematic manner.
In addition to drones, Ukraine has established the production of its own cruise missiles. We're talking about the long-range Neptune with an increased range of up to 1,000 kilometers and a warhead of about 260 kilograms, and of course the Flamingo with a strike range of up to 3,000 kilometers and a warhead weighing 1,000 kilograms.
Usually the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, well, at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a warhead of 450 kilograms. What does a 1-ton warhead provide? If it hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 such missiles will completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters in diameter.
From time to time, Western Allies' weapons are used in strikes on military targets. The British-French Storm Shadow missiles, as well as American ATA-CMS, which the Ukrainian armed forces recently used to strike Voronezh.
Guys, we're being bombed. We're being bombed!
Recently, Russian energy infrastructure facilities have increasingly come under the sights of the Ukrainian armed forces. By cutting off electricity to Ukrainians, Putin is dooming Russians to blackouts.
Given the climatic conditions of the Russian Federation and the tactical and technical characteristics of the Ukrainian side's weapons, Russia is facing a harsh winter, both literally and figuratively. First and foremost, these are thermal power plants and other production facilities that sustain the vital functions of major Russian cities.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's a perfect moment to subscribe, like this video and share it. Please do it. Thank you and glory to Ukraine. Over the past 24 hours, Russia has lost at least 890 soldiers killed and wounded. That brings the total Russian losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,162,120 troops. In the last day alone, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 2 armored vehicles, 19 artillery systems and dozens more pieces of enemy equipment. More details from the front lines next.
Russian occupiers are not stopping their attempts to encircle Ukrainian forces in the area of Pokrovsk and Mirnorad in the Donetsk region, but the Ukrainian armed forces continue to hold these cities. Russian soldiers are complaining that a new tactic is being used against them. But the main reason for the occupiers' troubles is themselves, since the Russian army is now recruiting a complete rabble.
We are on assignment in Pokrovsk. Right now they're taking everyone on contract, whether you're a drunk, a drug addict, or an athlete. Ukrainian is the official language of Ukraine, a country in Eastern Europe. It is a Slavic language spoken by most people in Ukraine and by Ukrainian communities in other countries. The language is written using a version of the Cyrillic alphabet. Ukrainian is an important part of the country's culture and identity, and it is used in daily life, education, government, and media.
Sabotage groups infiltrate behind Russian army lines and simply wipe out the inexperienced and often drunken occupiers, another factor in the successful operations. In this direction, the destruction of ammunition supplies that the Russians try to deliver to their personnel using robotic systems. Russian soldiers are forced to advance practically in hand-to-hand combat, but despite constant pressure from the Ukrainian armed forces, Pokrovsk and Mirnorad are still being held.
It is holding thanks to the fact that we continue to maintain our positions in the areas of Rodinsky and Rishain, thus preventing the Russians from closing the pincers of an operational semi-encirclement and accordingly allowing us to ensure logistics for our garrison operating there.
The security service of Ukraine has recorded that the invaders are even trying to storm Pokrovsk, using local residents as human shields.
Woman, man and a child, 13 years old. What he said. You civilians take them with you and take them with you for the sweep there, damn it. Let them go ahead of you and check. I accept.
The occupiers forced the victims to walk in front during the clearing of buildings in the city. Such actions by the Russian Federation's occupying groups violate the requirements of Article 28 of the Geneva Convention on the protection of civilian persons in time of war and are classified as a war crime. In
the city of Pokrovsk itself, the number of firefights is increasing and enemy losses from direct fire are growing. And it is possible that Ukrainian defenders will withdraw from their positions within the boundaries of Mirnorad. This will make it possible to redirect the freed-up resources to holding the bottleneck up to the Pokrovsk-Mirnorad agglomeration. It seems that, despite various tricks by the AFU, they may still be able to hold their positions in this direction for quite some time.
Let the military decide how exactly to proceed, whether to continue defending Pokrovsk and Mirnorad or to carry out certain maneuvering actions involving withdrawal to other lines and positions, avoiding the operational encirclement of our forces and assets.
Taking advantage of the fact that Ukraine is sending additional forces to Pokrovsk, the enemy has intensified offensive actions in the Zaporizhzhia direction. According to deep state analysts, the Russian army has advanced near Vesele, Vysoke and Zatishia. Strategically important cities, Orikhiv and Huliaipol, are at risk of being encircled. Russian FPV drones are forcing residents of Huliaipol to leave the city. In recent weeks, the situation with UAVs has become as tense as possible.
Now the situation has changed dramatically. In August, the Russians came even closer to the city and the intensity of shelling increased. FPV drones started flying near the city. There are so many of them that the sky turns red, say both the police and the military. And it was precisely in August that the evacuation intensified.
According to analysts, the occupying forces are no more than 8 kilometers from Huliaipol. Russia is trying to advance northeast of Huliaipol in order to isolate the city and cut it off from key logistical routes. However, the Ukrainian armed forces are blocking these attempts.
Germany has announced long-range missiles for Ukraine. Chancellor Friedrich Merz says technical consultations with Kyiv lasted several months and are now in the final stage. The number of missiles and delivery dates are not yet announced, and it's also not clear which missiles exactly. Maybe the Taurus, but that's just a guess. President Zelensky met Turkey's President Erdoğan in Ankara. They discussed several security issues. At the joint press conference, Erdoğan said Turkey is always ready to discuss proposals with Russia that would open the path to a just peace. For Turkey, Ukraine remains a strategic partner. Crimea is Ukraine, as are all other temporarily occupied territories. Zelensky added that Erdoğan offered several formats for talks, and Kyiv supports them. Turkey is ready to provide the needed platform. The question is, will Putin agree?
Peace is closer than ever before. The White House expects that a framework agreement to end the war between Russia and Ukraine will be reached by all parties by the end of the month and under the most favorable conditions, possibly even as early as this week, according to Politico. However, it is quite possible that such a peace will not satisfy either Ukraine or Europe and will only give Russia time to prepare for the next attack. According to Axios, citing anonymous sources, while Ukraine was rocked by a corruption scandal, so-called Mendichgate, and a political crisis was unfolding, the US and Russia prepared their own peace plan and did so in secret not only from Zelensky's administration, but also from their Western partners.
According to Axios sources, the 28 points of the plan can be divided into 4 categories: peace in Ukraine, security guarantees, security in Europe, and the future relations of the US with Russia and Ukraine. It is still unknown how the plan addresses contentious issues such as control over territories in eastern Ukraine, where Russian troops are gradually advancing but still control far less land than the Kremlin demands.
According to Axios, behind these nearly 30 points are meetings between Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Kremlin Envoy Kirill Dmitriev. Allegedly, the two of them held intensive negotiations in Miami at the end of October. Dmitriev himself confirmed this information to journalists and stated that in Moscow they feel that the Russian position has truly been heard.
Dmitriev told Axios that the main idea is to take the principles that Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed upon during their meeting in Alaska in August, and to develop proposals that would resolve the conflict in Ukraine as well as restore US-Russia relations and address Russia's security concerns. It's actually a much broader framework that essentially raises the question of how to finally ensure lasting security in Europe, not just in Ukraine, he said.
What the Russians and the Americans agreed on remains a mystery. But both before and after the Putin-Trump meeting in Alaska, the Kremlin made no secret of its ambitions. There aren't even any differences from the original plan. In Moscow, they still want, and Lavrov has stated this, to control the government, the church, the media, and the status of the Russian language as a state language, as well as to achieve demilitarization and non-aligned status.
There are 28 points grouped into 4 categories, which are hidden behind rather favorable-sounding names, such as guarantees of security and stability in Europe. But what could Dmitriev and Witkoff possibly come up with? I think that's a rhetorical question. Apparently, the US really does believe that they are close to some kind of agreement. But for us, it's important to understand that these agreements, as always, are being discussed without Ukraine. And as always, they are trying to present Ukraine with a fait accompli.
Politico and Reuters report that an American delegation has secretly arrived in Ukraine. Trump sent Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, to Kyiv, a friend of Vice President J.D. Vance from Yale Law School, who has become a key figure in the Pentagon. Allegedly, he will not only be interested in Ukrainian developments in the field of drones, but will also promote Trump's desire to announce the end of what is already his 9th war as soon as possible. A meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and the Americans is expected to take place after his return to Ukraine. On Wednesday, the president visited Ankara, where he planned to meet with Witkoff, but Witkoff cancelled his trip to Turkey. The plan of Witkoff and Dmitriev, which they are trying to persuade the Ukrainians to accept, is being actively discussed against the backdrop of a political crisis in Kyiv itself, with demands for the resignation of ministers and the formation of a new government. Amid the potential redistribution of influence and portfolios, Russia once again barbarically attacked Ukrainian cities. In Ternopil alone, the number of dead has approached 30 and the number of injured is nearly 100.
And finally, Russia's weapons export. Before the full-scale invasion, it brought the Kremlin around $14 billion a year. Now it has dropped by half. How does this threaten Russia? The answer in our next story.
The Russian military-industrial complex is on the brink. Exports of Putin's weapons are falling.
There are unofficial figures, and no one disputes them.
The main reasons are budget constraints and sanctions, which complicate the economic situation in Russia. The so-called special military operation has shown the world not only the weakness of the Russian army, but also of its weapons.
People who are currently employed in the arms market are asking a simple question. Is the weaponry produced by Russia really that truly effective? Because, listen, when you're supposed to accomplish something in 2 months, but you can't do it even after 4 years, then maybe your weapons aren't that great after all. And accordingly, many buyers of Russian weapons and military equipment are now starting to wonder and question, if Russia, a country known for its military strength, can't win this war quickly and decisively, then maybe their weapons and armaments aren't actually that good or reliable after all. And if these weapons aren't that good, then maybe it's not worth buying them.
Before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the export of Russian arms brought about $14 billion in foreign currency revenue to the economy every year. Now, compared to 2022, it has been cut in half. If in 2018 to 2022, Russian supplies went to 47 countries, then in 2024 to 33.
The Russian Federation held one of the leading positions in the global arms market. It should be noted that the Russian Federation's main defense orders come from India and accordingly countries of the Near and Middle East. That is, the most solvent countries at the moment are precisely those re-equipping their own armed forces.
According to an American publication, last year Russia exported only $1 billion worth of arms.
The Russian Federation is forced to admit the fact that it is unable to fulfill international orders. A vivid confirmation of this is the failure of the Indian order. This concerns the delivery of S-400 surface-to-air missile systems to that country. Moreover, the contract was signed before 2023, and since 2023, the Russian Federation has already extended this agreement twice. And the explanation that has been given for this situation is that the Russian Federation, at this particular point in time, simply does not possess a sufficient number of surface-to-air missile systems. These are not only required to meet the needs and demands of the Indian side, but also, and just as importantly, to satisfy the requirements and needs of its own army as well.
For the Russian military-industrial complex, foreign contracts have always been more attractive than domestic ones. Thanks to them, the Russian military-industrial complex grew wealthier, which allowed it to simultaneously supply the Russian army as well. However, the situation has changed now.
Russia both profited from this and at the same time made others dependent on its maintenance services. We understand that, especially in matters of the military-industrial complex, it's important not just to sell a helicopter, a plane, a tank, whatever it may be, but the main thing is the maintenance, because technical service is essential, and this is exactly where that dependency would arise. And now, when people are refusing to buy these products, they're also refusing the maintenance, because you can't provide maintenance for equipment in other countries. And if you sell something, that's a one-time deal, but maintenance is a deal that lasts for many years to come. And this is another area where Russia is losing out.
Russia's military industry has focused not on exporting its products, but on fulfilling domestic orders for the Russian army, which have become a priority amid the full-scale war in Ukraine. But even here, problems have arisen.
The opportunities to replenish the Russian treasury have sharply decreased, and accordingly, the capabilities of the Russian military-industrial complex have also diminished. Moreover, Chemezov once again emphasizes, I'm quoting the original source here, that the government needs to provide long-term and cheap money to support technological development. But at the same time, he also notes that the Russian political leadership currently does not have such opportunities.
Currently, the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex is engaged in restoring Soviet-era models of heavy armored vehicles, the expert emphasizes.
Western technologies form the foundation of the Russian military-industrial complex. This includes equipment, electronics, and essentially the main components for manufacturing both weapons and armored vehicles. And at the present moment, lacking the necessary ability to purchase or acquire technological equipment and essential components, the Russian company Rostec is now forced to openly admit that its main activity is essentially and primarily focused on the maintenance and repair of Soviet-era armored vehicles.
Losses of Russian military equipment during the war in Ukraine are estimated to be in the tens of thousands of units, including tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, airplanes, and helicopters. And the actual losses are likely even higher.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.